It's a great pleasure to have you all here today. I think all of you know I am Dan Esty, and I am, for a few more days, Commissioner of Connecticut's Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And one of the things that I'm very proud of, and a number of you have told me as I've talked to you in kind of my planned transition, how much you've enjoyed this Commissioner's Lecture Series. But I have found it to be very exciting, very interesting, and a real way for all of us to make the commitment that we all want to make to continuous improvement and to ongoing education. So it really has been fun for me to have the series of speakers we've had, to hear how they're approaching their part of the environment challenge or the conservation challenge or the energy challenge. And we continue that series here today with an extraordinary speaker, Brenda Pulley, who is the Senior Vice President for Recycling in Keep America Beautiful, one of the great environmental organizations out across this country. KAB, as they sometimes call themselves, is one of the leading community-minded organizations. It is, of course, a nonprofit, and it has a broad mission of bringing people together to build and sustain vibrant communities that are sustainable and attentive, in particular, to their natural beauty. This is an organization that is probably most famous for its anti-littering campaigns, and I think it's had a strong voice in environmental debates, particularly in waste debates, over many, many years. Some of you will recall, I recall, the 1960s campaign that really launched the modern litter movement with Every Litter Bit Helps. And this was a campaign that was pushed early on by Lady Bird Johnson, who some of you again remember having really made her name as a First Lady on this issue. And again, one of the things I think is most interesting, and I'm very much hoping Brenda will, if not address it in her opening remarks, perhaps then in question and answer, it is how you change a mindset. Because as we've talked about here, change is hard. We have a lot of things we're trying to get people to do differently. The waste arena is certainly one. And I hope some of you will be able to remember, and others will be able to think through how we changed from a society where it was thought to be okay to throw trash out the window of your car. So in 1960, or call it 1959 when I was born, that was a normal thing to do. By the 1960s, it was no longer normal. In fact, given the work of Keep America Beautiful, I think you've seen a complete shift in basic societal norms around litter. It's not as though we've solved the litter problem, we still have it, but there is definitely an understanding and appreciation today that it's not okay. And so that is one of the big questions. How do you shift people's mindsets around changed behavior where something has been accepted for a long time, but we now know it is not a good pattern, not acceptable from a point of view of sustainability? So I think one of the interesting things that Keep America Beautiful has done is public education. And it was not just Every Litter Bit Helps, but perhaps the most famous public service announcement in history, which was known as the Crying Indian. And some of you will recall it is a Native American who is burdened by the litter that he sees. And you see a tear come down the eye. And the tagline was, again, one that got a lot of attraction, a lot of attention. People start pollution, people can stop it. And that, again, I think helped shift the mindset of America in a very significant and big way. So Brenda's here to discuss Keep America Beautiful's agenda. A new national campaign that is now focused on recycling is at the heart of this agenda. The title of her talk is Transformation of an Occasional Recycler into an Everyday Recycler. So she is doing what we're doing in terms of thinking hard about what transformation requires and how you deliver on it. Brenda's been with Keep America Beautiful since 2010. She's been working to enhance the national efforts to increase recycling, to increase participation, again, an agenda that we share. She's responsible for the organization's overall strategy, program design, stakeholder outreach, and national advocacy. And again, it really is an interesting parallel, and I hope we can dig into this a bit, between what Keep America Beautiful is doing in shifting thinking about waste, particularly about ramping up recycling, and our own efforts to do the same. So I'm thrilled that we've got a number of people here who've been playing a role in the deep efforts to ramp up recycling. I think all of you know we're kind of plateaued at about 30% diversion of our waste stream. We have a state goal of 58%, so we have some work to do to get where we need to go. But I see in the front row is our Deputy Commissioner, Mackie McCleary, who's got charge of this issue. and a number of others who are, I'm sure, going to be listening carefully as we try to take on board some of the best practices Brenda wants to share with us. So Brenda, thank you very much. Appreciate your being here with us.
Thank you. It's very nice. So thank you. If you cannot hear me, do let me know. And it's a delight to be here. I think this series is a wonderful series, and I suspect that I'm going to learn as much from you guys as you'll learn from me. So while we're pulling that up, what I want to talk to you today, thanks for the introduction about Keep America Beautiful. I do want to give you a little more history of it, but clearly the commissioner hit the high points. But then lay the landscape a bit of recycling, sort of nationwide, and then do talk most recently what we're doing in the space to help reduce waste reduction and recycling, and specifically a new national campaign that we just released. So first, Keep America Beautiful. We have been around, we're celebrating our 60th anniversary. What we are known for is very much about bringing people together in their community to help make particularly their public spaces in that community better. So it is about creating clean and beautiful places, reducing waste and increasing recycling, and then really inspiring the next generation of environmental stewards. And through all that, not only do you have a better looking environment, cleaner and greener, but that there's positive economic impact for that community, and that you also help build the social network of that community. So that's in large part what we do. Oops, hold on. Okay, so our mission is about engaging individuals to take greater responsibility. But again, it is about pulling that community together and making a positive economic and environmental impact. Please know we have 1,200 plus affiliates, some state organizations. We have 3 affiliates here in the state of Connecticut, across the country. So both affiliates and partners that we work with. We work with many of the state recycling organizations, et cetera, so that we can engage 7+ million volunteers a year. We have 25,000 plus cleanup, beautification events a year, as well as some recycling. So enough of sort of who we are, but just, I always put this up and say I'm not going to play Jeopardy, but it is just to talk about the range of things that we do. Most of you may know that our headquarters is in Stamford, Connecticut. So I happen to be out of the recycling department, which is housed in Washington, D.C. So we're very much focused there. The other parts of Keep America Beautiful are very much focused on the Great American Cleanup and our other beautification planting efforts. Okay? So let's launch into recycling and the landscape. And I will tell you that I stole this headline from Ed Hume, who recently wrote a great book about trash. He calls it Our Dirty Love Affair with Trash. But again, just setting the stage, I know you guys probably are very familiar with some of this, but just that every day, every American, 330 million of us, generate 4.2 pounds of trash a day. About 1.5 of that is either recycled or composted. So also a recent study came out, and I know you guys will appreciate this from the organics perspective, that a family of 4 throws away approximately over $2,000 worth of value of food. So the whole supply chain is throwing about 40% of our food supply. So when we look at where there are real opportunities to make significant increases, clearly organics is one of those in food organics. But what I say is we're still working on people to recycle their bottles and cans, folks. And so think about reaching that organic slice is going to take even more behavior change. And then each American over their lifetime leaves behind 102 tons of trash. So if somebody's a math whiz in here, they're going to look at my first number and my last number and say, I'm not sure that connects. And I want to put 2 numbers out there. Data, I'm sure you guys have wrestled with data and having appropriate data for the state, and not every community measures differently. It's one of the challenges in this sector. It's getting better all the time, but it's one of the challenges we've had. And the way you measure, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but EPA estimates the 4.2 pounds a day that are generated. If you look at what's going into landfills and in recycling facilities, it's estimated it's at least twice that amount. So there's some real differences in the data of the waste that we're generating annually. So the next slide, 250 million tons a year of what we're, again, these are EPA's numbers that were generated. I put this slide up so you can sort of see where the largest sectors are. Clearly paper, and plastics, and think how lightweight plastics are. And I'll talk a bit about how paper is actually reducing. And we're seeing, the waste stream is really changing, you guys. I mean, if you talk to the hauling companies or, cities that do some of their hauling, they'll tell you that waste stream is changing. And that's causing all kinds of ways that they have to view how they collect and handle the material. So plastics is clearly increasing, but yard trimmings and then looking at food scraps, some big sectors where we can make some big changes. We tend to always look, when I say we, I mean the industry, look at where to make the biggest gains by looking at where the pounds are, because we're very pounds driven. And I always want to challenge people to say, let's look at pounds, yes, but let's look at the economic benefits. Let's look at where you make the most environmental benefits. So it may not be led by the pounds that you can make significant greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So maybe you guys are thinking of it that way, but I always try to say, let's look more broadly at this sector. So Americans spend more on waste management than on fire protection, parks, recreations, libraries, and school books combined. Again, some of this is from Ed Hume's data, but I thought I'd share with you just to put in perspective. Think about that infrastructure of the trucks and the collection. And then, I was talking, it was in Phoenix the other day, 7 million miles just in Phoenix to collect their waste and recyclables. So what do we need to do? The idea is, how do we get more people to recycle? And if you're talking to the waste management community, they will tell you it's also how do we get them to recycle more and to recycle right. So recycling is complicated. So 34% of the waste material that's currently generated is recycled. That gets to about that 1.5 pound per person. If you strip out the organics, which is mostly yards trimmings, you're at about 25% that's currently recycled. So again, like you guys just said, lots of opportunity for improvement. Are we going to get to 100%? Let's just keep moving forward on that one, okay? We'll work our way towards zero waste, as we say. So I know you guys know this. I've looked at some of the reports that you've done. This is just one small snapshot, okay? This is taking just a few of the commodities and materials that we know we're currently sending to landfills. I've heard Waste Management cite it's anywhere from $15 to $20 billion of potential value of material that we're currently sending to landfills. So does recycling pay for itself all the time? No, but it's important to look at that whole cycle, if you will, the collection cost, what you're not sending to the landfills, and the potential material cost of recycling, or the value, I should say, of those materials. So I want to talk about how the landscape is changing a little bit. For those of you, and I suspect there are a few of you that have been doing this a while, been in the waste management recycling business. And where recycling started to take its peak in the 90s, and it's been increasing a little bit every year, but we've clearly plateaued. And so what can we do? The good news is waste generation per capita has also plateaued. So that's great. In fact, it's even gone down a little bit. Overall, we're generating more waste as a country, but clearly on a per capita basis, not as much. So what can we do to increase it? And part of the reason I decided to join Keep America Beautiful when I did was to take on this issue. I'm convinced the tide is turning for us, right? I was hoping that we were at a tipping point. I think we got a little longer to go. But my point is that companies are looking, and when they do their business plans, and I came from an aluminum company, I will tell you, global aluminum company, and they look at where the resources are. They look at population growth and the middle class growth that's happening in India and China and other places around the world. And with demand coming on board, they're looking at where they're going to get those resources. And it's forcing industry and others and governments to look at least more broadly at those topics and to think more from a life cycle standpoint. And it's coined, and I'm not sure who coined it, I hear McKinsey, but this concept of a circular economy, that if we we mine and make materials and a lot of energy goes into doing that, how do we keep those into the economy? And frankly, recycling is a global economy. I don't have stats on how much, I'm not going to go about how much is global, but it's a global economy. And I'm sure you guys have heard about the green fence and the repercussions that's caused because China's now implementing, saying, you know what, you got to send us cleaner waste streams. Because we thought they need that material. They've got great, they've got labor costs that are lower, that they can sort through it, et cetera. But even China's saying, look, our requirements are stricter, and we're going to start enforcing those. So it is a global economy. Industry is looking differently. I mean, look at all the companies that have made commitments on zero waste landfill policies, but also are using more and more recycled content. So it's happening. I wish it were happening a little faster, I'm not going to lie, but it is happening. That's changing the perspective. The other is the industry. I mean, the consumer. I mean, we hear all the time, studies come out all the time about how consumers, yes, if you ask them, do they recycle, we know that 80, 90% people recycle, and I say that's great. I'm a little surprised the recycling rate's not a little higher. But we do know that over the years, consumers are more interested in the transparency about, whether it's food or whatever, where the materials are coming from, the things they buy, where they're coming from, where they go, what the company's doing with them, those kinds of things. And I think those are all good signs to help drive waste reduction and recycling. So that's a little bit about where the tide has changed. What do we do to get to that? Well, I missed 63, what's your guys' 58, I apologize, 58. I say just, I sort of have this, could we get a U.S. recycling rate, 20 by 50, so by 2020, can we get to 50% recycling rate in the U.S.? And I'm not going to go into all these. You guys, I know many of you in this room know, there are lots of different areas, when you think about the life cycle of where a product is made, and particularly just once it enters, it goes from that consumer's hand, as I always say, and it can either go into the trash bin or the recycling bin. And so how do we get them to put more of it in the recycling bin? And that means you got to have a market for it. You got to have collection for it. So there are a lot of different areas. The key ones I always talk about is data standards, right? If we don't have the right data, we can't compare apples to apples. It's going to be hard to measure successes and where to best put our energies for improvement. There's infrastructure building and efficiencies. I just talked about how the changing, the waste stream is changing, and so all those MRFs, there are the recycling facilities. What they're having difficulty is they built and invested millions of dollars to handle a certain waste stream that's now changing. And so it's taking, and new materials are coming online all the time, new packaging, right? So that's there are a lot of people working on that, and that's great. That's not where we spend our efforts. Then where we spend our time is, how do you get the individual to rethink, particularly, when they have a package, it's in the end of life, rather than putting it in the trash bin, how do we keep it into the stream? There are all kinds of policy changes that can help influence that. And then, a topic that's always talked about are the markets for this, but more and more we're hearing, and it's happening in some instances, but frankly, I'm surprised it's not happening more, and that's when a company is designing a product or packaging, that they're now thinking about that end of life, that they're now talking to their sustainability or waste management team, or actually go to the waste haulers and talk to them. One of those, a new plastic bottle, it has that plastic film that's covering. Guess what? When it got to the recycling bin, the recycling optic reader couldn't read it and rejects it. So it's those kinds of things that I've been in several meetings where industries trying to figure out what they need to do so they can prevent some of that happening, okay? So what do? We KAB, where we spend our time, when I talk about all those different segments in the chain that need to be worked on, where we really focus our time primarily is about building that awareness and activation. I make it very clear, you can educate people a lot, you can try to educate people a lot, but that doesn't necessarily change behavior. And so we're trying to find, how do you change that behavior? And we have lots of learnings, a lot of other sectors, healthcare industry have lots of learnings. And frankly, that's what we're working on. We have some findings I want to share with you today, but I argue there's lots more that we can do in that space to learn and then share that knowledge. The second is we're very much knowing away from home. So it's one thing to have curbside, and we know there's much more that needs to be built out in the U.S. Just because, 80% of people have access to curbside doesn't mean that they actually have a bin. A lot of it's subscription services, and that's where they may not have that bin. But it's also then not only that, it's away from home. So I suspect your office buildings are very well have lots of recycling bins, but there are a lot of other office buildings, schools, universities, institutions, park settings that don't have it. So we actually work a lot on the public space. So it's not only placing bins in public space, but it's also understanding what the best practices are, what's the right signage, what's the right placement, and then sharing those among our community. And so the thought leadership is really about learning from the community, doing some research, and then making sure we share those learnings, okay? So I'm not going to go into all of our programs, but I did want to just mention them. It looks a little overwhelming here, but I do try to sort them through by the audiences that we have. So we have lots of different programs that are really designed for recycling educators, for a teacher, for just an advocate for recycling, that they can take a program, participate in it, host an event at their workplace, at their school, or in their community. So I'll talk about the public service campaign in detail, but most of you hopefully are aware of America Recycles Day. It's been around 15 years. It's a great day to spotlight recycling waste reduction. So we work with literally thousands across the country that host events and use it, as I say, as an excuse to stop and celebrate recycling. We also have a program called Recycling at Work. We'd be happy to talk about more of that. But the idea is how to support workplaces in making recycling a priority. I talked about the recycling bin grants. We also work a lot with the college community. Many of you may know the College and University Recycling Coalition, 1,000+ members. They're the recycling coordinators or sustainability directors on their college campuses. So we work with them on an array of a couple different programs. In fact, one launches next week. It's called Recycle Mania. It's an 8-week competition among schools to see who can recycle the most. It's a great benchmarking tool for them, which is awesome. But frankly, it's also really used to how to activate and engage the students, the staff, the faculty in recycling. I sure hope Yale does it, and I should have checked my notes. I didn't. But maybe we'll have to check on that. And then another move-out program. So move out in the spring, need I say, when kids move out, it's time to move out, and the trunk gets full. Guess what happens to all the leftover material? So we're working on a project there. And then we just came off the heels of a K-12 recycling competition, announced the winners yesterday, and I'm going to share with you the winner in Connecticut. So I'll move on, but that's just an array of the kinds of programs we have, and I encourage you, happy to talk about more of those, or encourage you to go to our website and find out more of those. The other thing that we've talked a bit about is I just want you to know in our various programs, we are always looking to how to implement the tried and true research that's out there, and then to do some additional new research. So competition theory is a way to get at behavior change. That's a couple of our programs. The commitment theory, if you make a commitment, you're more likely to make that behavior change. So we have an America Recycles Day pledge. That's a little bit of the concept of the Recycling at Work pledge. Removing barriers. First and foremost, you got to make it convenient. You got to remove barriers. So that's make sure you have the bins, make sure the information is easy. And then communication as well. I will tell you, we do have a research project for our Recycling at Work that we're working on. It's about bin placement, common areas at desk side, and some signage that's going on. So a year from now, I'll be able to talk about that. It's 4 different office buildings in 4 different states across the country. So Recyclable, I talked a bit about it. It's the K-12 program. We had 1,500 schools plus that participated this year. It's our 3rd year of this program. Really look forward to continuing to build this program out, not only because of the excitement it generates at the school. We have found that 3 to 4% of the schools that sign on and start a recycling program as a result of this competition or this opportunity for it. We also had a great George Washington University capstone project that studied the data that we had and had discovered that if you participate in this program, you recycle 10% more than a school that doesn't participate in this program. More importantly, I'm shocked to find that 35% of the schools in this program don't have a waste hauler. That means their janitor or a teacher or someone's collecting their recyclables. Great for them and hauling them. All of us in this room want to make that change. I mean, we want to get to 100%. Enough said on that. Let's talk about 25 schools in Connecticut participated this year. We thank you. The champion that we just announced yesterday. So every state, there's a national prize winner. California was the school that won. But there's not only a national prize, but a state prize. So the school that generates the most per capita, or I should say recycles the most per capita, gets a $1,000 cash prize thanks to our sponsor, Nestle Waters, the Pure Life brand. We thank them very much. They've been the key sponsor to help launch this program. Anyway, Rippewam, I hope I say that right, middle school out of Stamford is the state winner. Okay? So now let's get into the campaign. I am going to assume some of you are familiar with the Ad Council and their policy. They're another nonprofit. They're made up of the top ad agencies across the country. You think Smokey the Bear, you think autism. They've done a host of campaigns. 40 years ago, we worked with them on the famous Crying Indian campaign. They're all about how to make social change. So we are partnering again with them to develop the recycling ad. We've been working on it a couple years. I'm thrilled to say it's out the door. Now it's about how to get it activated so that more people can see it. So the goal of this ad was really about, I always say it's not about increasing recycling rates. I mean, it is at the end of the day. But what the part that we're really focused on is that behavior piece. So it's how do you increase recycling participation, okay? A little nuance there, but I share that with you. And we know that what we need to do is to create a passion and a reason to believe in recycling. So that's sort of our charge. when we started the discussions 2 years ago. You guys know this. I've talked about some of these. What are the challenges? Access and convenience first and foremost, that I'm sure you guys address every single day, how you can overcome, how all the communities across your great state, how they can overcome that. So challenge, cost barrier, all kinds of other things. But the other is, let's be honest, recycling is confusing, even when you want to do it. Once you get past bottles and cans, plastics, really? I mean, I come from the aluminum sector. I'm spending a lot of time trying to figure out all the different plastics, to be honest. But it does get confusing. So, how do we make easy information for folks? And the lack of motivation, as I said. One is having, access, but then again, how do we really nudge that person to take that action? And put some feeling back in the brand that's been around, the recycling symbol, okay? So we did do nationwide survey to get sort of some baseline of stuff. Nothing new came out of that. I mean, it's stuff that we do know, that inconvenience, first and foremost, I've talked about that, not enough information, not encouraged enough. Some people are going to be disbelievers. So I always say, there are lots of different data points out there that talk about the advocates that are going to do it, right? Those that are environmentally have a leaning toward that. That's 16% of the population. I suspect all of us in the room are sort of there. You don't really need to be nudged. There's also another 10 to 15% that, frankly, don't believe it, aren't going to do it. And spending time trying to convince them, frankly, it's a waste of time. We found that in our pledge, that you don't want to, if somebody doesn't want to pledge to recycle more, don't ask them again, because you're only going to reinforce the negative with them. It's that middle sector, that 65% in the middle, we call the movable middle, the sporadic recycler, that we're trying to get to recycle more, okay? So, current behaviors, 38% think they're avid recyclers. So I talk about that 15, 16. Polls always show a little higher. The poll that we took, 38% think that they're avid recyclers. It's the 52 in our most recent poll that we're going after, okay? I wanted to share this with you. I don't always show it, and I apologize, put them all on one slide. But I wanted you to know that we did a lot of research. So there's I won't go into all of it, but there's the experts, there's the research of the data that's out there in the development of this campaign. There's looking at other studies, what worked, what didn't, other campaigns. And then I take credit for this, bear with me, it was the ad agency that gets selected through this process that does the work for us, and most of it's pro bono, by the way. But they came up based on the research and some focus groups at 3 or 4 different cities that we did, that informed the first concepts of what a creative campaign might look like. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't share this all the time, but it is, they knew going in, the agency knew going in it was going to be an environmental message, by the way. They knew it was going to be about saving trees and saving this and that. And they were really perplexed that it wasn't that easy. So 5 different creative strategies that were tested. So one was just recycling 101. One is the earth wants you to recycle, that environmental message. One, not recycling is not cool, trying to be a little edgier, which some of us have been doing this a long time, thought that was sort of neat. We liked that. The other was the potential of trash, and then your trash talks. And I won't go into all of these and the problems they have, but if anybody wants to, by all means, ask me a question. But what we found that most resonated with people was this concept of the potential of trash. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So most respondents found the potential trash the most eye-opening. This is just one example of the focus groups and what they said. Everything can become something new and amazing as opposed to just having it sit in a landfill and waste away. And I can't tell you the number of times that we would hear people talk about, well, you mean it doesn't have to be wasted? So, but the second thing that really registered well, it's how do I find out? Where's easy information to find out about what, when, where, and how to recycle? So I say that to you that are responsible for also sharing that information. We have not found the secret, except, keep trying. You can't tell people too many times or share that type of information. But it's very important what they need. So just in a snapshot, what really informed, this is taking all the learnings, 1.5 years of the work of what then informed the final elements of the creative campaign. So I talked about how to educate and motivate, and it is a lot of parallels to the Crying Indian campaign, and that whole effort that helped change our culture from throwing stuff on the trash to put in a trash bin. I say we're doing that same thing, except now not in the trash bin, but we want to get them to put it in the recycling bin. And the key is, how do you make that cultural shift, that expectation and that social norm, Because frankly, over time, I don't want people to have to think about it. I just want it to be the natural thing to do. Our target, that sporadic recycler, the key insight that I talked about was that potential of trash and how you are empowered to give your garbage another life. And that, talking with people, it went from sort of an obligation to a responsibility that they wanted to more take on, okay? The call to action then is, I want to be recycled. And the key is to try to engage people enough so they will go to our website or go to your website and try to find out more about what's recycled in their community. I have to put this up. Our sponsors, thank you to our sponsors. We clearly are looking for more. I will tell you, but they really, they believed in us when it was all the concept and we all wanted to have some consistent national messaging. So thanks to them. So now I might have to have some help since I stumbled a little bit on the earlier one. But I want to play the 60-second spot for you. Has anybody seen this ad on television yet? Oh, I love it when people raise their hand. Okay. Obviously, somebody was not watching HGTV, or I've heard it was just played on the Australian Open, but anyway.
They said I couldn't dream. Called me a piece of trash and swore that's all I'd ever be. Said a bottle couldn't see the ocean. Give up. Go back to the dumpster. But I didn't listen. I made my way. And now, I am what I've always wanted to be.
So it's the emotional grab. I hope you see it, right? It's trying to help. And I told you I came from the aluminum industry. There is nothing more efficient than an aluminum can to aluminum can. I won't get into all the details, but it really does save 95% energy, 95% emission reduction of greenhouse gases, et cetera. So the fact we couldn't talk about can to can, but we had to talk about can to something else, and I'll show the next ad, or bottle to something, to the park bench. But that's what captures people, right? That's what they love knowing. So I will tell you, for America Recycles Day this year, as part of the pledge, we did a drawing. We drew 10 names, people that pledged. We gave away 10 recycled content park benches. So if you don't mind, we got a minute. I'll play the 15-second commercial.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today, I'm just an aluminum can, but one day, I could be a stadium.
So I keep hoping, surely with all that coverage on Super Bowl, that one station may play it, but we'll see. Again, the model is we're very reliant. Ad Council sends it out to their 30,000 plus media outlets. It is donated media. So FCC says, yes, media partners, you have to play. You have to have some pro bono time donated. They don't tell them how much. And there are other campaigns out there. So we are actively working. That's one of the reasons I'm here. We're actively working on not only what the Ad Council does to help activate that campaign, but what we can do at a state and local level to also help activate it. So I'll talk about that a bit. So I just want you to see some of the other creative that's out there. So it's a PET bottle to jeans, which, as many of you know, you can buy jeans or slacks or T-shirts or all kinds of things these days. Still food can to a bicycle. And then the website, I'm not going to spend time on this, but I invite you all to go check out the website. One of the key, there's some very general information on recycling. There's an infographic, and there's all kinds of things on it. Lots of other links of where to find information, electronics, and where to find certified recyclers, those kinds of things. But one of the key things is really, how do we get people to a city or a state so they can find what's recycled in their community? There are a couple databases out there. You probably know of them. What we ended up doing was working with Google to develop a zip code locator. And so if there are any city communities, it's one of the things we can work on to make sure we want that city, So it goes out the internet, scrapes the data, pulls it back and presents it, and we want to make sure that city is listed. So we are working on that to make sure those are. That means working with cities, please test it, make sure they are. So all means there's there's fun stuff about what material can be. Very active social media campaigns. We can talk, about, you can follow us, #BeRecycled. We just actually did a recycling Twitter chat last week. It was great. Always love the questions that come in. We are working with a number of cities. I mean, we have just started. Some are, Wisconsin called, and I think it was Madison that wanted the graphics, wanted to put them on their trucks. We're working with the city of Chicago, who's put them out in all kinds of signage in their trucks, and big belly recycling bins. Have translated the ads, in fact. It's been out about 5 months. I will just tell you that so far, this is preliminary, we have about $10 million in donated media so far. A lot of radio. We do have one radio ad that I've heard that even several times. But it's also about getting that outdoor advertising and others. So this was right outside of San Francisco, the ad is. I did want to put up the website in case any of you want to go to it. I don't know if you can read it, but it's iwanttoberecycled.org. I encourage you to go to it. Would love to have any feedback about the site. And then I want it for those of you, and I realize not everyone here, but we are working with both our affiliates, our recycling partners, and cities and states to say what you can do. In fact, each of you can encourage your local media stations. They all have a community representative to say, hey, there's this ad, it's an option, think about putting it in your pro bono play space. That's one thing. But anywhere this ad can run, there are restrictions, right? Because it's part of the Ad Council campaign. It must run in donated media. So if the state has a television channel, or a city has a television channel, or a video, that's all donated space, okay? Besides the media, then donate space. The Ad Council has changed the rules. I won't get into them, but sponsors, and what we're also trying to do works with some cities and states, that if you come and quote as some kind of sponsor, you can then take the ads and pay for placement. I mean, just because we want to get it out there and get it used. But right now, no cost, anywhere there's, quote, donated media. So I'm talking to all kinds of retailers because they can put it in their circulars, they could put posters in their store, they could run the radio station, and they could put, I'm talking to one right now, Weiss, I don't know if they're here, but we're talking about how to put it on the plastic bags or paper bags. Anyway, Fresh Direct, I don't know if they serve here, they're in New York City, they're a home grocery store delivery, I forget the number of boxes per day, but it's staggering just for New York City. They've now put it on all their packaging, home delivery packaging. I didn't put it in here, but it says, I want to be a cereal box, I think is what it is. So it's a cardboard box that can turn into a cereal box. Anyway, lots of opportunity with welcome talking about that. Now, I talked longer than I thought, my apologies, but I'd love to have some questions, comments, reaction? Somebody? Please.
Yes, so just starting out at, first of all, thank you. This is, as I think, everyone can hear me, right?
Oh. Does it work?
So I'm the deputy commissioner, as I mentioned, and this is obviously a very exciting and important issue for us. We've been working on it since its inception, but in particular in the last couple of years, with the governor's focus on it. It's been a big deal. I have one very specific question, which is that you mentioned that the Ad Council ads cannot be purchased in their current form. Can you talk to me more about the rules around that? Because it's one of the things that we are exploring. It's been an area of notable statewide underinvestment for us, both in terms of marketing and in terms of education. So exploring ways that we might be able to take advantage of that would be very exciting to me.
No, that's great, absolutely. And I will tell you, Ad Council, they have been changing the rules along the way. So this is the first time ever that we've gone back to our sponsors, that Ad Council has ever gone back to the sponsors because we so want to get it out there. And there is another issue. We know so many cities want this but don't have a budget for it, and that's honestly, I welcome that conversation with you today in more detail. But for the first time ever, the easy thing is take it now, any donated media, and somebody come up with creative ideas, right? I mean, we've talked about going to movie theaters and all kinds of others where we can define what donated media is. So anybody has any ideas, I welcome that, right? But what we are trying to do is work with states and cities and do, quote, a scaled down a sponsorship amount so that would then authorize them to take those ads and buy placement. So we are looking at that, and welcome. I would love to talk in more detail with you. So Austin, Chicago, A couple cities in California we're in conversations with right now and trying to figure out what that model will be. We haven't figured it out yet. We've got some ideas. I've got a straw man, I'll say, that we're looking for feedback, which frankly, when I got the call to do this, is one of the reasons I wanted to come and talk to you guys. I'll be honest, okay? Please.
When you spoke about your sporadic recycling, did you have any associated demographics that you could share with us?
Sure. I apologize. I should do that because you guys would care about that. Yeah, it is always, the folks that recycle the most are always the more educated, older, that's the demographic that tends to recycle the most. The younger generation, I get my millennials and stuff mixed up, but let's just go from the 18 to the 30. They say they recycle, they're more environmentally, but frankly, their actions have not yet shown that. Okay? I hope nobody's, yeah. And so, part of that is, how do we get to that group, right? How do we get to them? So, it is, this campaign was designed to go from the 18 to 65, I think is what we said. So it is a very general campaign in that way with that audience targeted. Does that start to get to some of the demographics you were interested in, or?
Well, I was curious as to when you look across the nation,
Mm-hmm.
because one of those ad council pictures you put up there was a very white-bread mom and kids, and that's not the 21st century family that we're going to be living with. Where things start to look different across the nation or in pockets around the nation, and how those messages need to be tailored to actually attract their attention long enough to get them to think about it as opposed to just watching.
Absolutely. And again, I don't want to make excuses for it, but we were sensitive to that. We realized we had to go generic. This is about that national, consistent messaging. I will tell you that there is much other work, and we hope that there'll be more ads, right? As this campaign hopefully continues to grow, it gets traction, attracts more dollars, we will make more ads, and there might be more. I will tell you in the research that we work on, it is exactly that. It is, micro-marketing is in every part of our life now, and channels to get to people. And this sector, by that I mean the waste reduction recycling sector, is trying to work on it more. I know Hartford's a great example of where there's some great work that's been done. So we call it community-based social marketing. We are doing some research projects in that. I can tell you there are a couple out there that are being done. I won't say the cities yet. Interesting enough, one has pay-as-you-throw, which excites me, by the way. But there are ways to say, how do we get to the demographics of a specific community and within that community and decide and learn, do research to learn what not only what message is most effective, but the delivery of that message. Yes.
Hi, my name is Cheryl. I actually work with Connecticut Deep Recycling, just so you know.
Good.
And love the campaign. We actually promote it very well here
Thank you.
in terms of our social media especially. I wanted to ask you about reuse, and I'm wondering where reuse fits in the Keep America Beautiful sort of overall work, whether or not you support the concept, and whether or not you'd come out and support National Reuse Day.
I have seen National Reuse Day. Let's talk about that. So I will tell you that, and the research in the development of this campaign, let's be honest, the public doesn't distinguish, at least currently, doesn't distinguish between reduce, reuse, recycle. They don't get it. And that's okay. If they get recycling, let's play off recycling. And within that, share all different kinds of examples and messages, okay? So there was talk, I'll be honest, there was talk about, wow, people do get fascinated with reuse, and should that be part of the campaign? No, you can't. We have to simplify the message, which is recycling is sort of the lead, if you will, for that. And we hope that, I truly believe that if you can advance recycling and get that message and get that interest, that within that, you start talking about waste reduction. If you really want to go there, right? How do we reduce? How do we not purchase in the first place? How do we reduce packaging? Then reuse, then recycle. And happy to talk to you about Reuse Day, okay? Did that answer?
Thank you for coming. I wanted to ask if KAB has taken a position on product stewardship and extended producer responsibility as a means of increasing recycling and decreasing illegal dumping.
So we have, historically KAB does not take position on policy issues. And I love that because you look at members of our board, there's some pro-EPR, there's some pro-deposit refund, there's some that aren't. So historically, we have not. We actually did 2 years ago, published sort of a principles paper on EPR because we knew it was a big growing issue. And so the concept that everybody in the value chain has some responsibility in it is where we go. That's great, but you and I both know that's great to say. Don't quote me on this. But you know, what really matters about EPR and taking a position there. So the part where I think KAB can be helpful is the dialogue part. So a year ago, we do these symposiums. I did one on behavior change, which was great. If anybody wants to go back, there's a webinar on it, which is really worth listening to part of it. But I did one on extended producer responsibility. And it's great. I had a sponsor that was very for and a sponsor that was very against. And what we do is really take people from across the community, all the different stakeholders, and pull in. I had people from Europe and Canada that live and breathe EPR every single day, all different aspects, and really create a forum where people can talk about it, because it's so politically charged. I mean, you know, you guys have made great strides in some very key areas, right? So electronics and mattresses and paint and carpet, that's one thing, but when you start talking about the everyday common materials, it starts to get much more complicated, and you pull in different people and different political views. So what I think we're very good at is really being a great convener. And so it's 100 people, we do it in a college-based setting, and we ask people to please park their egos at the door to the degree everybody can. But is there some political posturing? Sure, but it's an opportunity to really focus on a topic and people really learn. You get past the soundbite. So it's a day and a half and people get past the soundbite. I hope that helps. Happy to talk more about that.
So you mentioned changes.
Yeah. Oh, you have to have a mic. I can.
No. Yeah, you mentioned changes in packaging, and we're starting to see that from things that we traditionally recycle to materials that are multiple materials.
Yeah.
I'll use
it's more complicated.
Yeah. As one example, which we have a problem with, it's not easily recycled. Any insight into that?
The pouch, did you talk that? Yeah. Actually, I know about that because it has a thin layer of aluminum. And there's been lots of efforts. You know, the company I worked for in Europe, we had a recycling facility. Frankly, we had to close and shutter because it's not yet economical. So over time, right, it's that, you know, how do you create that market, right? Where's the right amount to subsidize the loss leader, whatever it is? And then, you know, I'm convinced the technology today, people are so much smarter, but the concern is with the material stream changing so rapidly, you really do, how do we get the waste management processors with the manufacturers, designers, let's be honest, with the marketing guys, right? I mean, that's the primary purpose of a package. I mean, there's safety issues and, you know, food preservation, all kinds of other things, but it's also largely driven by marketing appeal and that kind of thing. And so how do you get that group aligned so that they can at least think and be more knowledgeable about you before you put it in the marketplace? So I'm convinced, you know, look, the Carton Council, you know, they've done some interesting work. I mean, 5 years ago, it would have been the pouch issue. 40% of Americans now have access to recycling cartons. That's your gabled, your milk cartons, your soup containers. I mean, and that's a multi-layer. It's tough, you know. So I hope I'm answering your question in a roundabout way to say it's something that the industry needs to be thinking about more before packages put in there. But we also have to be realistic what the drivers are. But I'm happy to say some companies are having conversations about that. Some big companies, I would say, some big retailers. But the second thing is, are there ways to nurture the technological development so it can be economically recycled? Okay, sorry, I'm giving you lots of hope with saying it's just a tough one right now. It is being done in Brazil. There's some work being done in Brazil, but that's the last I know of it. It's a challenge. Next. I promise I won't be so long-winded on my answers. Yes?
Have you done any research on what moves consumers in terms of organics, recycling, organics, composting?
We have not. I really want to. It's the next big frontier, right? I mean, rural, multifamily, organics, those are the big frontiers. Public space, those are the big frontiers. I mean, there are some guiding principles I do want to leave you with. It's being very positive. All the time we say only 34% is recycled. You know, don't say that. You know, we talk about the increase year over year of recycling. It's about in order for people to make it that community norm, we all have to talk about it. We have to set the example. Commissioner Recycling every day sets that example. You know, that the governor, the mayors, city leaders, you guys with your community neighbors, all that sets that example and starts to make it that community norm. So lots more work to you know, help us learn how better to do that. And as I said, I think organics is going to be a huge challenge because convenience is such a factor. And that, you know, I personally am struggling with it at my house, you know what I mean? So, yes, please.
Hi, I'm the legislative chair for the Sierra Club in the state.
Oh, great.
And I love the work that Cheryl and Tom and Chris and the other people in the department are doing on solid waste. But there's one thing which has impressed me more on the issue than anything I've ever come across, and you didn't mention in your talk, and I'm curious if that figures into your campaign at all, and that is the movie WALL-E.
No, sorry on that one. No, it is not. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Cruzabonte from Hartford.
Of course,
and, you know, you speak about these goals of diversion, and I recently conducted a full cost accounting associated with Public Works. So when you had that slide go up and it showed how much is spent on solid waste collection, I could safely say that about 62% of our budget, Public Works budget, is dedicated to solid waste management, which is horrifying. So when we look at this and we look at trying to divert, it becomes very difficult to not think about the municipal impact of collection costs and how might there be other ways to have people divert materials. So when you talked about starting with recycling and looking at waste minimization and reuse, we can't have this dialogue without really talking about the municipal collection impact, and adding something like organics would be staggering. You know, that could be a $3 million cost in collection and disposal costs. So I really think that the value in the message for me here is that we all need to have sort of a unified message. We've all talked about the fact that everybody in the state has a different message, and it would be really nice to be able to just have one area of messaging and not have to put our energies into that, so that we can then maybe refocus on how we might do diversion differently that doesn't involve collection. So things like EPR, or building, you know, the infrastructure that makes it economically viable to do things like organics. So I just have to compliment Keep America Beautiful, because I really think we all struggle with the fact that we do individual messaging. It has to be much more culturally in tune. It has to focus more on young people who are lazy, or maybe live in apartment complexes where landlords don't do diddly squat. Right. When it comes to that. So we need to drill down a little bit more on that 65% to figure out how your message can be a little bit more targeted and motivating.
And I would just say there's so many things I want to say to that. And Marilyn and I know each other. She does great work. I learn from her all the time. There is so much in this industry that needs to be done, and that whole full cost accounting, and the fact that, I mean, I talked to a number of cities, and they're getting better all the time at better understanding the cost, right? $7 million, or 7 million miles is what it was. I forgot the dollar cost. New York City, I mean, all that, so we're getting better about it, but the resources are still spread too thin. And so, yes, your message is very well taken. How can we, the sector, work better together so a group can focus on how to get better accounting and make the system more efficient? How we and others can be very focused on what are the right messages. And, you know, a lot of research went into this, guys. I mean, a lot. You know, we're at a $1.5 million price tag so far. But again, we recognize, as we talked earlier, that is the generic messaging, but we do think that that's needed. And then how do we take that as a platform, and then from that do some more of that micro-marketing with insights that we're learning every day.
So please join me in thanking Brenda for an outstanding presentation.
Oh, I love it. Are you kidding? So So may I take one more minute? So first, I hope, Commissioner, you can accept this on behalf of Keep America Beautiful. Of course, it's recycled content. I used to be a plastic bottle, or bottles, I should say. So please, I invite you to that.
Thank you.
And then I just want to say, does anybody have a birthday on November 15th? Which everybody knows is?
Well, I'm going to tell you, we have someone who has a birthday today.
Oh my gosh, that's even better. Oh,
It
no,
happens
how
to be
does
our
that
new
happen?
commissioner.
How does this happen? That was good. Brilliant on behalf of Keep America Beautiful. Please, where it was from.
And Brenda, you don't know, this is a big one for him. 40 years old today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think that actually wraps up our day and our event. Well, not our day. Oh, yeah, no. Oh, that's right. I'm not allowed to let anyone go home. Yes. But thank you, everyone. An amazing talk. And this is one of the exciting initiatives we have for this coming year. So I hope all of you in the room and in your neighbor cubicles particularly work with our green team here at DEEP. We have a very active work recycling of all materials. So the folks there do amazing work. And everyone, thanks again. And we're at noon, so back to work. Thanks.